And we're in the Benedict Music Tent at the Aspen Ideas Festival in Aspen, and we're joined by the Attorney General, Eric Holder. Mr. Attorney General, thank you so much for being with us.
It's good to be here.
Let's just start with the top of the news. This bizarre ring of Russian spies, or whatever they were, after they pled guilty, a deal was worked out to exchange them with some people that the United States had an interest in. Just give us the details. What's this about?
Well, the 10 people here in the United States pled guilty to acting as agents of Russia without registering with our government, and we essentially orchestrated a swap so that we had access to, or got that, for people who had been charged in Russia with conducting intelligence activities on behalf of Western countries.
What do we get here? I mean, the United States, the FBI, spent 10 years tracking these people. Do we have any indication that they stole anything of significance?
Well, they didn't pass any classified information, and for that reason they were not charged with espionage. On the other hand, we have broken up a pretty substantial network that consisted of what they called illegals, 10 people who were in different parts of the country and who were trying to, in some ways, insinuate themselves into our country and find ways in which they could get information from a variety of sources. They actually did make contact with certain people and did obtain certain information from people who were unwitting in their interaction with these people.
Well, what do we get in exchange, the 4 people that they're being exchanged for?
These are people, as I said, who have been charged with intelligence activities in Russia and in whom we had a great deal of interest, as well as England, and we have gotten those people back.
Mr. Attorney General, most of the time when the FBI spends that much time and that many resources on watching people like this, prosecutors usually want to prosecute them. They want to put them in jail. Why did they agree to make this deal?
Well, there were a variety of reasons. I mean, I think chief among them being the concern with the swap that we ultimately concluded. They could have been placed in jail, but we saw this as an opportunity to get back to England and get back to the United States these 4 people in whom we had a great deal of interest. And it was on that basis that we decided to make that decision.
Why did you decide to close in on them now? Why was it decided to break this whole thing up?
Because one of the members, the husband of one of the couples was in the process of going to France and then on his way to Russia, and the concern was that if we let him go, we would not be able to get him back. There were other operational considerations that we've not been in a position to reveal and cannot reveal at this point. There were operational concerns that if we did not act at that point, the possibility existed that we would not be able to break up the ring in the totality in the way that we have now.
It appears that they didn't pose much of a threat to this country, did they?
Well, they were acting as agents of a foreign power, and therefore they were certainly a threat in that regard. The potential for what they might have done was, I think, a serious thing. And the reality is that we had them under observation for over 10 years, monitored their activities, saw what they were trying to do. They were supported by Russia to a very great degree, hundreds of thousands of dollars, great amounts of communication between them and Russia. Russia considered these people very important to their intelligence gathering activities, and we agree that, in fact, they were important to the Russians, and it was for that reason that we monitored them and took this extremely seriously.
One question that we've gotten a lot of emails on and a lot of calls at CBS News: what happens now to the children?
The children have all been repatriated. We did so consistent with what their parents' wishes were, and to the extent that we had children who were close to majority or majority, they made their own decisions as to where they wanted to go. So the children have all been handled, I think, in an appropriate way.
Because some of those children, because they were born here, would actually be U.S. citizens.
Right, and to the extent that they had the ability to make choices and were old enough to make them, they made their decisions and they've gone back with their parents.
Let's turn to the other big story of the week. You filed suit to ask a judge to overturn Arizona's new immigration law. It has put Republicans in a rage. Here's what Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell said. He said, suing the people of Arizona for what the federal government has utterly failed to do will not help secure our borders. Senators Kyle and McCain, the Arizona senators, say, Attorney General Holder speaks to the federal government's responsibility to enforce immigration law, but what are people of Arizona to do when the federal government fails its responsibility? So why did you file this lawsuit?
I understand, first off, the frustration of the people of Arizona and the concerns that they have with regard to the amount of illegal immigration that occurs. But the solution that the Arizona legislature came up with is inconsistent with our federal constitution. It is responsibility of the federal government to decide immigration policy. And what the Arizona legislature came up with was a statute that is inconsistent with the federal constitution. It's preempted by the federal constitution. And on the basis of preemption, we decided to file a lawsuit. We have an immigration policy that takes into account a whole variety of things, international relations, national security concerns, and it is the responsibility of the federal government, as opposed to states doing it on a patchwork basis, to decide exactly what it is our policy should be with regard to immigration. And it was on that basis that we filed the lawsuit.
You've heard the same criticism that I have. Some are saying that it's just all politics, that what you're trying to do is to brand Republicans as anti-immigration or, in fact, anti-Hispanic before the elections in November.
No, not true at all. The basis for this was a legal determination by those of us at the Justice Department that the law was inconsistent with the Constitution. And I think one has to also understand that there are a substantial number of Republicans and people in law enforcement who thought that the decision that we made to file this lawsuit was, in fact, the correct one. So it is not a monolith. There's not a Republican monolith here where people are saying in the Republican Party that this was an inappropriate decision.
When the Arizona law was first passed, both you and the president expressed concerns that it would lead to racial profiling because it allows the police, if they think someone might be in this country illegally, gives them the right to stop them, and they have to produce papers to show that, in fact, they are citizens. Yet your lawsuit doesn't talk at all about racial profiling, or if it even mentions it, it's just barely. It just talks about the federal government is being preempted from a duty that it has to perform. Why did you choose to go that route?
Well, we wanted to go out with what we thought was our strongest initial argument and to focus what we thought is the most serious problem with the law as it now exists. Doesn't mean that if the law, for whatever reason, happened to go into effect, that 6 months from now, a year from now, we might not look at the impact the law has had and whether or not there has been that racial profiling impact. And if that was the case, we would have the tools and we would bring suit on that basis.
Are you saying, though, that states and local governments have no responsibility when it comes to enforcing immigration policy, that that's solely the responsibility of the federal government?
No, states and local governments can certainly help the federal government enforce immigration laws. What we're saying is that they cannot pass laws that are inconsistent with the federal laws or do things that contravene federal policy when it comes to the enforcement of our immigration laws. And the Arizona statute, if you look at the guts of it, really puts in place a whole variety of things that are inconsistent with what we have decided to do as a federal government. And it is on that basis that we decided to file the lawsuit.
The trouble in the Gulf continues. You said a couple of weeks, or it's getting these months ago, you announced that the government is going to open an investigation to determine if the conduct of BP officials constituted criminal behavior. It was a very unusual thing for a law enforcement or prosecutor to announce that. Number one, and when you did announce it, I would add, the stock of BP fell. It really tumbled. Why did you choose to make that announcement?
Well, I was very careful in what I said. I did not say that BP was under investigation. What I did say was that we had opened a criminal investigation, but did not indicate who the subject of the investigation was. And that is a very serious thing because there are a variety of entities and a variety of people who are the subjects of that investigation. And for people to conclude that BP is the focus of this investigation might not be correct. And
but it might be correct.
I'm not going to go any further than what I said in New Orleans and what I've said today. But given the extraordinary nature of what our nation is facing there, we thought it was appropriate to let the American people know that the federal government understood what was going on here and that we were using the full panoply of our powers to open both a criminal investigation and a civil inquiry to ensure that the American people don't pay a cent for the cleanup, that we were going to do all that we could to restore the environment to that which it was looked like before, and perhaps improve it, and to make sure that we held accountable anybody who was responsible for the spill.
So where is the investigation now? Should we be expecting indictments anytime soon, or any actions?
I mean, the investigation is ongoing. Our primary concern at this point is getting the spill stopped, and hopefully that will happen relatively quickly. The investigation is ongoing. We're in the process of accumulating documents, talking to witnesses on both the criminal side as well as the civil side, but I wouldn't put a timetable on when we'll be.
All right, let's take a break here, and when we come back in 60 seconds, we'll talk about a lot of the other things that are on your plate, including what are you going to do about Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind of 9/11.